All right, good morning, everyone. Let us see how far we can get today with this lesson 13. Um, Hopefully, we'll be done with this in the next 2 weeks so we can start this next book towards the middle of November. So we'll see kind of how far we get for this week. Okay, so we went through a lot with Ruth. This is a great book for a lot of different reasons. Our focus has been faith living righteously. We looked at the family component in chapter 12, and in 13, we're looking at this living righteously and kind of being prepared for God's blessings in your life in advance. That way, when those blessings come, you don't miss your blessing. So, specifically in application, we're looking at the story of Ruth and Boaz and their interaction and relationship. Chapter 2, if just as a quick recap, we remember that Ruth, who is a daughter-in-law of Naomi, they came to this area of Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. She interacted with Boaz because she was able to glean on his property. He was very wealthy. He was a family member of Elimelech, who was the spouse of Naomi, and she found favor in his eyes. He was very kind to her, let her glean, and then also let her reap with the rest of the reapers, gave her some sustenance, and she brought that back to Ruth, and they were continuing there. Verse 23 of chapter 2, they stayed to glean to the end of the harvest of barley and wheat harvest. Chapter 3, we get the interaction that we looked at last week, where Naomi was seeking a husband for Ruth. So she said that there's no better kinsman than Boaz for her. And she established this plan where basically Ruth will go dress in bride attire and go in where Boaz was sleeping, stay at his feet, and then see if he would have her as his wife. And then last week we looked at that story as he did go out, he came back, had a good meal, fell asleep, woke up, seen a woman at his feet, asked, "Who are you?" Verse 9 of chapter 3. She said, "I'm Ruth, your maidservant. Take your maidservant under your wing, for you are near kinsmen," meaning basically come together in marriage because they're family through marriage. So we didn't have time to look at this, but you can go into the law to look at responsibilities for widows and the family members of the spouse that passed away in terms of taking the spouse in. Boaz said he was happy to see her in verse 10, and he said, "You have shown more kindness at the end than at the beginning, in that you did not go after young men, whether poor or rich." Because we talked about Boaz being older, he was wealthy, but his point was, wow, you showed a lot of kindness towards me, because you could have basically any suitor of your age you could have grabbed after, whether they were rich or poor, but you went after me. Then in verse 11 he said, "Do not fear, I will do for you all that you request, for all the people of my town know that you are a virtuous woman." We talked about her reputation preceding her, which was a good thing for a godly woman. Verse 12, "Now it is true that I am your near kinsman. However, there is a kinsman nearer than I. Stay this night. In the morning it shall be that he will perform the duty of a near kinsman for you. Good, let him do it. But if he does not want to perform the duty for you, then I will perform the duty for you, as the Lord lives!" Exclamation point if you have New King James. "Lie down until morning." So she lay at his feet until morning, and she arose before one could recognize one another. Then he said, "Do not let it be known that the woman came to the threshing floor." And he said, "Bring the shawl that is on you and hold it." And then as she held it, he measured 6 ephahs of barley and laid it on her. Then she went into the city. Verse 16, "So when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, 'Is that you, my daughter?' Then she told her all that the man had done for her. And she said, 'These 6 ephahs of barley he gave me, for he said to me, do not go empty-handed to your mother-in-law.' Then she said, "Sit still, my daughter, until you know how the matter will turn out. For the man will not rest. He has concluded the matter until he has concluded the matter this day." All right, let's look at chapter 4. Someone read for us verses 1 through 8. Chapter 4, verses 1 through 8.
Then went Boaz up, then went Boaz up to the gate and sat him down there. And behold, the kinsman of whom Boaz spoke came by, unto whom he said, Lo, such is such a one. Turn aside, sit down here, and I. And he turned aside and sat down. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, Sit ye down here. And they sat down. And he said unto the king's men, Naomi, that is come again out of the country of Moab, selleth a parcel of land, which was our brother Elimelech. And I thought to advertise thee, saying, Buy it before the inhabitants and before the elders of my people. If thou wilt redeem it. But if thou wilt not redeem it, then tell me, and I may know. For there is none to redeem it beside thee, and I am after thee. And he said, I will redeem it. After what?
Verse 8.
Okay. Then said Boaz, What day does Boaz the field of the hand of Naomi? Thou must buy it also of Ruth the Moabite, the wife of the dead, who raised up the name of the dead upon his inheritance. And the kinsman said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I mar mine own inheritance. Redeem thou my right to thyself, for I cannot redeem it. No, this was the manner in former time in Israel concerning redeeming and concerning changing, for to conform all things. A man pluck off his shoes and give it to his neighbor, and this was the testimony in Israel. Therefore the kinsman said unto Boaz, Buy it for thee. So he drew off his shoes.
All right. Then someone read for us verse 9 through 12.
Boaz said to the elder people who are witness this day that I have all that was Ellis and all that was children and allies from the hand of Moab. Moreover, Ruth Moabite is the widow of Melon. I have acquired as my wife to perpetuate the name of the dead who inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from the one who treasures from his position at the gate, or witnesses the day. And all the people who were at the gate, and the elders said, We are witnesses. The woman who is coming to your house like Rachel and Leah, the two who built the house of Israel, and may prosper in the Bridgeport, and be crushed and be famous in the community.
All right, great. Now let's go back to Leviticus 25:25, just to give some context to what's happening, because what they're saying and doing may be very strange in our modern culture. But let's read Leviticus 25. We don't have time to read all of the law that is making reference to what they're doing. But this Leviticus 25 talks specifically about what they're doing in terms of land, which is playing a part in terms of marriage. Whoever has that can read that. Leviticus 25:25.
If one of your countrymen becomes poor and sells some of his property, his nearest relative is to come and redeem what his countryman has sold.
Okay, so that's what's happening here. So when Boaz was talking about there's somebody who's a nearer kinsman than you, he's talking about doing things in proper order, right? So he went in chapter 4, he went to the gate and sat down, and behold, whoever he was thinking about that he spoke to Ruth about, he's seen, right? So we don't have a name, but he's seen them, and he said, come aside, friend. This is chapter 4, verse 1. Sit down here. He came aside and sat down. Then he gave him this full scenario of what's happening, right? Now, Naomi, who came back from the country of Moab, sold a piece of land which belonged to our brother Elimelech, and I thought to inform you, saying, buy it back in the presence of the inhabitants and the elders of the people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not redeem it, then tell me that I may know, for there is no one but you to redeem it, and I am next after you. Right? So he's laying down the course of events. Basically, he's saying is, listen, they sold this land according to the law, Leviticus 25:25, because we're well off than them. They're a widow. Our brother died. Our kinsman died. We have this opportunity to do right by them and buy this land back. Only two people that can buy it is you, who's unnamed in this story, or me, as in Boaz. So this is what he's basically laying out for them. The guy's first response was what? Right? So then he was like, okay. So then more details started to come out in verse 5. Boaz said, on the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you must also buy it from Ruth, the Moabite, the wife of the dead, to raise up the name of the dead in the inheritance. Let's read Matthew 22:24. Matthew 22:24. Matthew 22:24.
Moses said, if a man dies having no children, his brother as next of kin shall marry his wife and raise up children for his brother.
So this is when the Sadducees had come to Jesus and basically was asking him this question. Verse 25 talks about there were 7 brothers. The first died and died. And therefore in verse 28, in the resurrection, whom will the wife belong to of the 7, since she already was married to all 7? Like a little riddle. And Jesus was saying that in the resurrection, verse 30, neither marry, those will not be known to either marry or given to marriage, but are like angels of God in heaven, right? But concerning the resurrection of the dead, have you not read what was spoken to you by God, saying, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. God is not the God of the dead, but of the living. Now that what they're asking, what they were trying to trick Jesus or ask this riddle of Jesus, is coming from the law, though, because it's stemming from Deuteronomy 25:5. Deuteronomy 25:5. We can turn there. You can leave Matthew because we don't need to reference that. Deuteronomy 25:5. Somebody read that.
When brothers live together and one of them dies and has no son, the wife of the deceased shall not marry outside of the family to a strange man. Her husband's brother shall owe it to her and take her to himself as wife, and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her.
All right, so this is where their kind of question is coming from, right? So remember, this concept of keeping things inside of the family unit is a big deal to the Israelites, because as they're moving to the promised land and get to the promised land, God said, don't intermarry with the people around you, right? For a lot of different reasons. Mainly is for religious reasons, right? Don't intermarry with them. So if something happens where the brother dies and the widow is living, they're all very communal, living together, is the next brother who should take that widow as his wife, and if the widow didn't have a son, so that the continuation can go. Boaz speaks on that, because remember, Boaz is saying basically in verse chapter 5, verse 5 of chapter 4 of Ruth, where it talks about the very, very last couple of words, to raise up the name of the dead on his inheritance, right? So basically of not letting the name go, right? Because the wives are alive, the husbands are gone. Therefore, if they die, the name will go. So he's like, two people can write this, either you or me. Now, when the guy heard this second part in verse number 5, what was his response then? Yeah, I can't do this, right? Because his reasoning was, I'm going to ruin my own inheritance. So he has something lined up for himself. This is why Boaz was saying, right, there was no guarantee to Ruth. He said, we'll go through these steps, right? If he can't perform this duty, then I'll do it. So basically the guy said to him, I can't do it. But the guy response was, what back to Boaz? Basically kind of giving his blessing. Right, you do it, right? I can't do it because I already have other inheritance kind of coming for me, but you do it. You redeem. My right of redemption is for yourself, for I cannot redeem it. This is verse 7, for this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging to confirm anything. One man took off his sandal and gave it to the other, and this was attestation in Israel. Therefore, the near kinsman said to Boaz, buy it for yourself. So he took off his sandal. And Boaz said to the elders, to all the people, you are witness of the day that I have bought all that was Elimelech's and all that was Chilion and Mahlon's from the head of Naomi. Moreover, Ruth, the Moabitess, the wife of Mahlon, I have acquired as a wife to raise up the name of the dead on his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among the brethren for the gate in his place. You are witness this day, and all the people who were at the gate and the elders said, we are witness. The Lord make the woman, and if you remember, we read this as a reference when we first started this chapter 1 of Ruth. The Lord make the woman who is coming to your house like Rachel and Leah, the two who built the house of Israel, and may you prosper in Ephrathite and be famous in Bethlehem. Okay, let's look at some of these questions. What was necessary for Boaz to do before he could marry Ruth? And why? What was necessary, based off of those law verses that we read, what was necessary for Boaz to do before he could marry Ruth?
So there was another fellow who had claim to the lineage, as you might say.
Mm-hmm.
But he had a line of his own.
Mm-hmm.
If he took on Ruth, then and he had a son and he died, all of his stuff would go over to Elimelech's son.
Right.
So he didn't want to do that.
Right.
So he pulled out.
Yep. So we look at when we went back, right? When we were talking last week, you guys had a lot of great comments. Was talking about Boaz and Ruth's relationships or interaction was very, very mature and very spiritual focused. Because somebody was talking about Boaz. We characterized Ruth and then we characterized Boaz's personality. And someone was saying, Boaz, yes, he was rich and he was older. He could have got married maybe 1,000 times already. But his focus was different, somebody said. Then somebody was talking about things in terms of godly flow, because he could have literally even still, as he first praised Ruth for thanking her for coming to him and not someone else, but still he said what? Hey, we still have to resolve this thing the way the law said, the way God would want us to do, right? So emotions and feelings and all those sort of things didn't get involved in terms of their responsibility. Now, when we come into this concept of marriage today and under the New Testament, this story here speaks volumes, but we can go into a whole tangent on that. Yes.
So I've been doing a little bit of reading on this, and what I found out was that Boaz could have fulfilled his duty by just redeeming the land, right, for them. But he went above and beyond by redeeming Ruth also.
Yep.
And one of the comments that I was reading, said, he took the spirit of the law, not just the fulfillment of the law itself.
Right.
And I thought that was interesting because quite often, even in biblical times, but definitely today, we see where people do what the law or what God says just to do what it says. It's like a checklist. But we forget the spirit of the law.
Yeah.
So sometimes even when we know that somebody has done something wrong and we go up to them and tell them something is wrong, that's what we're supposed to do. But the spirit of the law says you do it with love and and you do it with compassion, etc.
Yep.
So I thought it was interesting that Boaz went above and beyond, you know, and he was fulfilling exactly what Jesus said, when somebody asks you for something, you give them more, ask you to walk a mile, you walk two, that kind of stuff. I thought the spirit that he showed was very interesting.
Yeah, I agree, because like this is like mostly, if you go this, basically the Beatitudes is a good transition to look at, because like Jesus was saying, like, you heard this thing, right? You heard this thing, you heard that thing. All the things Jesus was saying you heard was true from the law. But Jesus was saying, like, you guys have to do way better than that, right? It's not about murdering, it's you can't hate. So he was talking about the essence, right? This is why Jesus fulfilled the law, because love is the essence of all those different rules, because the rules are nothing. That's why when you get to 1 John, the whole concept is, if you love Jesus, you'll keep his commandments, and the commandments aren't burdensome, right? They're only rules if you're doing the letter. If it's essence, it's not rules. That's very hard to understand for people that are transitioning into relationship with Christ. But a relationship with the individual is the same way. Right? Rules of a house are only rules if you're looking at the letter of the law. Hey, I have to come in at 8 o'clock. It's 7:59. But hopefully the adults don't operate that way. Right? The rules for the kids don't impact the same way as for the adults, because the adults hopefully are not looking at them as rules, because they have a different relationship. Because married people shouldn't be looking at the things in a house as rules. Right? That's a grown concept of the essence of what we're doing is, oh, we're starting a family, right? That's different than rules. Kids don't understand concept of family, so their mind is rules. But when you grow into family structure, it should be more so of, oh, this is what a family's duty responsibility is. This is why, as we keep going through our understanding of a family structure, New Testament teaches us, hey, once people get older, you need to take care of your family. Bible says, if you don't take care of your own loved ones, you're worse than a what? A heathen. Because you should have already, since a kid now, grown into the knowledge and understanding of what a family is. Church is the same way. People who are new or have a weak understanding of church look at rules, like I have to come here on Sunday, right? But that's just, hey, Hebrews says don't forsake the assembly. But if you're only coming because of Hebrews, you're missing the essence, right? That's why I say all the time is people have to understand this is, if you thinking, hey, I have to do something on Sunday, let me run in here and take Lord's Supper and run out, you're missing the essence, right? If you miss Lord's Supper one Sunday, you're not going to hell. But some people looking at it too much into exactly digesting bread and juice in their mouth every Sunday, right? Yes, that is what you're supposed to do, but that's just the letter of the law. That's not the essence. 1 Corinthians tell us the essence of Lord's Supper, right? What are we supposed to be doing while we're taking Lord's Supper? So when we get to the Matthew verse, when they were asking about the 7 brothers riddle, that's focused on the letter of the law, but not the essence of this woman. Right? What about the woman? Right? They were too busy asking about selfish man things. In the resurrection, who does she belong to? Right? Jesus' point, that whole concept is wrong, because in the resurrection, there is no belonging, because you'll be like angels. What is he saying in a nice way? Right? There is no sexuality when you get to heaven, is what he's saying. There's no belonging, right? Because they're only asking for sexual reasons. There is none of that. Your body is like the angels. What is that? Exactly. We don't know. So his point was more of that. So when we look at Boaz, Sister Nadine has a great point, because he's looking at the essence of who Ruth is. We see that from chapter 2. Remember, he just only had to let her glean. He gave her some things. And then as time went on, he let her grab just reaping with everyone else. Right? The letter of the law was talking about gleaning, yes, but he went above and beyond, right? I think about the parable of the Good Samaritan, right? Who went above and beyond and helped this person and gave money, and then told the guy at the end what? If he rack up a bill, just put it on my tab, and when I come back, I'll pay that, right? That's above and beyond. He could have got this guy to help and say, hey, I got somewhere to go, you help him. But he went above and beyond. So this is more maturity. And again, entry level is very hard to comprehend this. But as Christians, we should be striving to move towards this understanding of a relationship with God, right? Just like in a home, you should be striving to move towards that understanding in a family dynamic relationship. Nobody should be acting the same way in a family at 2 years old, at 18 years old. No couple should be acting the same way married 1 year as 50 years, right? Like you should be on a progression to becoming more of the essence of the things that we do and say every day, right? It has to become a part of us in second nature. Same thing in terms of worship service, right? Worship service is an essence. There's acts of worship that's in our Bible that we must do, yes. There's do's and don'ts as Christians that we have to adhere to from our Bible, yes. But if we walked in the light as he is in the light, then these kind of everyday do's and don'ts would be free from us because those things will not become burdensome to us. But this is a transition. This isn't, hey, I see what's going on here, let me start doing this. This takes time to build this into your repertoire of relationship. That's why the Bible says each one have to work out their own salvation in fear and trembling, right? Just like each couple got to work out their own family and last name, right? Each home have to operate themselves. Each local congregation have to work out their own local congregation duties. There's no united or universal church to tell every local congregation what to do. Paul said in Corinthians concerning the collection, as a church in Galatia, you got to do too yourself. You can't say, well, just ask Galatia to give us some money. No, Corinth, you got to raise money for yourself. We don't have a lot of money, then you won't raise a lot, but it will be enough to sustain you in Corinth. That's why I say all the time in terms of giving it, everyone in this country have the ability to give because you have even on a fixed income. Now, you may not be able to give a lot, but that's not what the Bible is saying. But when you know here, we're not in another country, here, you are at least can be on a fixed income. So you can't say, well, because I'm on a fixed income, I can't give. Do bills work that way? No, right? Do people on fixed income still have bills? Yeah, right? People ain't, Verizon gonna say, oh, well, since you on a fixed income, then you know what? Man, I understand. That's got to be tough. So anytime minutes on us. Do it work that way? No. Right? So God's point is each congregation have to sustain itself. I'm not going to put the burden of a Church of Christ that's in, let's say, Beverly Hills on Bridgeport to say you need to be raising the same much money as Beverly Hills. Impossible. Paul's whole point was you need to be raising weekly just like they're raising, but not the same dollar amount. Impossible. That's essence, right? Changing from the letter of the law to essence. So that's a very good point. Yes.
So I spend a lot of time like researching in the Bible different stories about women because I have always been fascinated with the concept of the way that. So I think that it's interesting that Boaz took on the women, right? Because it wasn't just Ruth; it's Ruth and Naomi, and it says a lot about the way that he viewed responsibility. Because even in Deuteronomy, the reference verses that you're talking about, the point was that there would be a man in the family who would own that responsibility. I think that where we are right now, societally, also, within the church, is that we are forgetting the essence of responsibility. And there is beauty in taking on women as a godly responsibility. And so Boaz's commitment to following the law and yes, working in the spirit of the law to say, not only am I going to do this and get the land, but I'm going to get these women. We have to remember what he saw in her in the beginning, which was like a hardworking woman and a woman of honor. And so I think about all the times in which Jesus, through his ministry, raised a woman up
or cared for a woman or went the extra mile. And I think that that's the teaching that we really need to get back to in terms of men of all ages in the church. We should be teaching boys from a small age that you have a responsibility to take the responsibility of women in the church. And that's just not even through marriage, but like, can you pay attention to what's happening with the women in the church? And if you can't do that, you can't possibly be walking like Jesus, because Jesus, even in death, gave his mother, who he loved, to another man,
not his own brother,
in responsibility, right? He transferred, like this gentleman did with Boaz, he transferred his responsibility while dying to a man that he loved and trusted. And so I just think that that's so profound. And every time I read this story, I think about the thread to the New Testament and how Jesus really ensured the integrity, the position, the love, and the sustenance of the women around him. And even in his death, he thought, like, women are worth it.
Yep.
And so a lot of the time, like, one thing that I write about a lot for To Be Praised is just like, women matter to Jesus, women matter to us. And we, as a church, locally, but also globally, I think could be the front runner on a lot of like spiritual issues when we look at how important women are and why God desires men to be responsible caregivers of another portion of creation.
Yeah, see, this is why usually when it's men's meeting, not here really, it's more so like when we go to men's retreat and things like that, especially because I'm not married, a lot of the men, when they have comments, I always come in to say, the comments are making it seem like what we're doing in leadership is something that was given as a gift. But my Bible, that was not a gift, right? Adam having to work was a gift or no? No, where was that a gift? Right? When you get into Corinthians and everyone, male and female, were speaking, and then the Bible said, nope, because Adam was created first and now Eve was second. You have to be silent, and the men feel like that's at the men's retreat. They feel like that's a gift. That's not a gift. You know why? Because now the women who are sitting there, they know they can't. So that puts the burden of responsibility more on you. See, at first you got to understand service, right? Men have to understand service. Men looking for preeminence. That's why I say all the time, a lot of times in church, people want to be, I use this saying as the man here because they're not the man in their life. What that means, the man? Oh, that means like, bravado, swag. They may work at a job that they hate, or their family structure is not right, or they don't have the amount of money that they would like to have, all these things. And when they come back into the home, they bring that negativity to everyone else in the house, right? This is why when people get to church, they start feeling like, here's my chance to be what I can't be in the secular world. Nowhere is that in my Bible, right? In order to be of some value in church as a man, you have to be the least. You have to serve. That's why I say all the time is men want to preach. Preach is good, but did you notice if we have water? No, I didn't notice. Then why are you worrying about preaching? Well, I'm doing preaching work. Nope. Because a baby gonna what? Want to be Usain Bolt out the womb? No, right? Gotta crawl first. First, notice what's not right in here first before you want to do something, right? First, notice is a garbage back there. Notice if someone have their hand raised when people say, oh, if you don't have a bulletin. As a man, look around. You may say, oh, I already have a bulletin, but that was not an announcement, wasn't for you. When you get to harvest day, notice if somebody else not eating. See, first you have to notice because Jesus noticed everything. And as a man, it's harder for you because you have a direct reference of how to be Jesus. See, that's why I say all the time is the comments in them groups, the men be going off on a tangent because they be bringing their marriage and father relationship to church. And I say that's last name stuff. We talking about church stuff. It's a difference between what you're doing in your home and what you're doing in the church. But it's hard because if you're a father or a husband, how are you going to stop being a father or a husband? It's very difficult. That's why church is about Balance. That's why I say I can tell you things that I see that you don't see, because when you come to church married, you worried about your wife and your kids. I don't have wife and kids. So when I come to church, I'm looking at what? Because I sit in the back. So I'm looking at who has or don't have. See, that's why Paul was talking to the young women to say what? If you can stay unmarried, right? You're married to who? Christ. When we look at noticing, men have to do a much better job of noticing. To me, men don't even notice when their own kids or a wife are in need. I see men out in the world, not even church, and I can see when their kid drops something, kid drop pacifier, father way up there. Don't notice nothing. Sometimes I think, wow, I literally could have snatched that kid. And father over there somewhere, around the corner. Where's your kid? See, you have to be able to be on watch. That was Adam's flaw. Adam was not watching out for his partner. He was too busy wanting to do what Satan was tempting Eve with. Because Satan didn't tempt Adam first, but he wanted to do it instead of watching out for her best interest. See, if men can get back to looking out for women's best interest, we would have none of these problems. But men looking out for their own interests, which is why they asked Jesus, if the brother died and she married 7 times, in the resurrection, forget about her being with her father in heaven, who gets to have her? That's what they asked Jesus, because they're looking out for their own self-interest. When we get to New Testament, we see this. Let's look at Acts chapter 6, because this goes way beyond family. Because in church is your family, right? Some of you have no family in this state, maybe not immediate. We doing next of kin, or maybe in this part of this country, or maybe in this country, right? So church is different, because in Acts chapter 6, verse 1 said, now in those days, when the number of the disciples was multiplying, this is growing pains, right? Every church congregation will have this as the larger it gets. There arose a murmuring. Murmuring means people was upset, right? Against the Hebrews by the Hellenists, because their widows were neglected in daily distribution. Now remember, the pattern was set in Acts chapter 2 about selling all that you have, giving it to everyone, so everyone be equal, right? That sounds great. What started to happen was, when it was the daily distribution, the widows from one group weren't getting. So they started to murmur against the Hebrews, and the murmuring probably was a lot like, all this church stuff they talking, and they can't even take care of widows. See, because remember, it's going to be difficult to listen to Peter, Andrew, and all these pillars preaching, and you thinking, my stomach is growling. All this Jesus talk, Peter talking about, all these miracles and speaking in tongues and all this raising from the dead, and they can't even take care of their own widows. See, just like how murmuring happens in our congregation or other congregation, imagine murmurings if you were in a congregation with Peter as an apostle. Oh, he think he's better than everybody else because Jesus went to his mother-in-law house. He too busy worrying about his mother-in-law. He don't see the rest of the mother-in-laws in here. So the apostles set up deacons because their point was our role would be the spiritual sustenance for the church. Deacons' role will be the physical sustenance of the church. Therefore, Peter and the apostles were saying, pick from where will the deacons come? Another congregation? No. Pick from verse 3, among you with good reputation. This is why I say all the time is when you start talking about church leadership, deacons should already be doing deacon work. It should be easy to pick a deacon. It should be whoever is already serving. You don't be a deacon, okay, now I start serving, too late. Right? You need to be looking out for what's best for other people. This is why I agree with from children, but parents have to take this responsibility on. Some of you as parents have to decide what kind of men you want to raise, not church. Church is only Sunday morning. As a parent, because when I watched everything with Kavanaugh, the issue that I had was different than other people. The issue that I had was he was talking about underage drinking, and he said everyone does that. But I thought underage drinking is wrong. Is underage drinking legal or illegal still in the U.S.? And he was a lawyer, right? Lawyer and judge supposed to do what with the law? Uphold it. So now I'm totally confused. Because how is somebody running for judge? Let's put all the allegations to the side. How is someone running for judge who's telling me everyone drinks under 21? Because what if a kid was 16 and got into a car accident and killed my loved one and was drinking and driving? My assumption was he have sympathy on that person because he's going to say what? Everyone does it. He just was bad luck. See? So then I go back to his parents. Where was his parents that he as a teenager would be able to have a calendar full of partying and drinking and doing whatever he wanted to do? See, I come back to the parents. Just like if I go to somebody's house and a dog bite me, I'm not mad at that dog. That dog doing dog things. I'm asking, where is the owner? What's the problem? Why you have me over here with this rabid biting dog? Oh, see? When kids do something, I'm looking, where are the parents? Because kid doing kid things. If a kid don't have proper upbringing, I only assume the worst. Because how will someone know unless they're taught? I'm looking for the parents. So my point was, where is this man's parents that he grew up his whole life with the concept that everybody do what he said? Right? Other politicians saying, oh, that's taught that all boys say that in locker room. These men have parents. Where are their moms and dads? Not society. See, in their home, that was okay. So because there was no standard in their home, these young men came out into the world. And now they infect the rest of us with their upbringing. That's why I go back to my comments all the time to say what? Being a father is hard work. Too often comments make it seem like it's about getting a tie on Father's Day. Being a parent is a sacrifice where you literally stop doing things you want to do financially, socially, emotionally, spiritually for the well-being of another living soul. But I don't hear a lot of people talking about being a father that way. Men, I'm not talking about church, I'm saying men. I hear people telling me about the joys of this and the joys of that. Yes, there are fantastic joys in being married and being a father or a mother, but it is based off the foundation of responsibility. And that's what's wrong with society, in my opinion, today, is because people don't come out of homes that responsibility was taught. So if I never learned responsibility from my last name, why would I learn that in school or at my job or at my church? We have to get back to the essence. When I look at any city's issue in terms of crime, I take all the side, because it doesn't matter if I took all the people from Bridgeport and moved to Trumbull, took Trumbull people to move to Bridgeport, multiplied the people, crime will come. Why? Because the more people in a tight space is crime. Doesn't matter the people, what they look like. So my point is, let's move the crime to the side. Because you can do things to fix crime that won't fix the real issue. Then my next thing will be to education, where I say, wow, if Bridgeport have 150,000 people and Trumbull don't have nowhere near that, how come Trumbull have better teachers? That doesn't make sense to me. Better budget for police, better budget for fire. Now I'm confused because numerically that don't add up. But then I say, even if we fix all that disparity, kids are already what age? Then I come back to the home. And I said, if every parent took parenting as their responsibility to produce better citizens, both Trumbull and Bridgeport will be better. Kids in Trumbull will grow up thinking about those that may not have the way they have, and kids in Bridgeport will grow up being more involved with the things that they need to be involved in. And yes, their environments will bring some of them down, but the bulk majority will be striving to be higher on both sides. The problem is people always saying what poor people need to be doing. But poor people don't be in a position of power. The people that I referenced to in politics just now, they never was poor. Right? Brett Kavanaugh wasn't poor. Your president wasn't poor. So therefore, just fixing poor people have nothing to do with society issues. It's fixing the way we parent. It is. When you go home, what is the main source of subject or topic in your home that you create? Did your kids create your home? No. If you always talk about worldly stuff, that's why the kids always talk about worldly stuff. If you talk about godly stuff, they'll talk about godly stuff. If you raise a young man to appreciate a woman, man, that every mom in the world would be like, wow, that my daughter, I pray to God my daughter be with somebody like you. All the knuckleheads my daughter be bringing through here. But that comes from that young man's parenting. We talked about this last 2 weeks, right? Boaz, we said, maybe Boaz came from a broken home. People were saying maybe Boaz grew up more with other women in his life. But no matter what we were saying about what if, everyone's comments was the same that for whatever reason, Boaz had a different appreciation for women than other men had. We all recognized that last week when we were looking at this. When we start talking about church, culturally, we have to shed that. And this is struggle for different men in different culture. When you come into church, when we read Acts, what was the point? The Hellenists were saying to the Hebrews, this is very difficult. Even in men's retreat stuff, this is difficult. Men want to take their culture and bring that into worship service. But your culture is no better than my culture. So therefore, both of us have to put our culture to the side. So when we start talking about doing for women, I don't want to hear men telling me their culture, what country they come from. It doesn't matter. Because we talking about church things. Now, is that difficult? Yes, very difficult, right? If you raise a certain way, how hard would it be to not be that way? You got to try it. Because when we come together as a church family, we can't have the men lording over the women and not taking care or appreciating them, because that's not what Jesus would do. And that's what we have to hear and teach and preach more, because that's the difference of the letter to the law to the essence. That's why Paul was saying, even if you could speak in angels' language, but you don't have love, you're nothing. That's why Jesus said what? A new commandment I give to you. That's not even a new commandment at all. Love one another as what? As I loved you. Then he said what? Greater love has no one than this, but to lay down one's life for his friends. And then when you get to Ephesians, the whole point of husband loving wife was what? Like what? Like Christ loved the church and what? Died for her. But the only way a husband will be able to love his wife the way Christ loved the church is if he, as a young man, was raised in his home and in the church to look at women and other men that way. Because the verses before that was in church setting, each one be accountable to each other. So if I have a problem being accountable with one of y'all in here, you can only assume I would have a problem being accountable to my wife when I'm married, because I already have issues before I got to those verses. If you see me interacting with women and think, man, Ellis Jr. then I should not be married. A lot of people married shouldn't be married. A lot of people with kids shouldn't be parents. These are facts that people never want to talk about. Like, yes, you have a right to do whatever you want to do. Don't mean it's good for you. If you can't put yourself second and someone above you, you should never be married. Because that's what marriage is. See? These are the hard truths that people don't want to look at. Boaz was thinking about someone else's sustenance. He was talking about Ruth and Naomi, not only just land, not only just marriage, but taking care of them. That sounds like a financial burden. And his mind was thinking, wow, look, they don't have anyone to take care of them. This is not right. We got to fix this. There's only two kinsmen that can fix this, you or me. The other guy said, what? I already got something out in in the works. I can't really do what you say, but you have my blessing. Boaz was what? Everyone here at the gate is a witness. Is what we're going to do. So when we look at these things start at the home. Truly they do, right? Yes, society have issues and problems. But to Erica's point, church should be setting the standard where people in society can look to a group of people and say, but they're doing it. I say all the time is, especially in this country, as local congregations, we've dropped the ball too much. We dropped the ball on civil rights. Why? Where was churches? Where was all those down south churches? Pillars. When I was at Trumbull, they used to tell me about these pillars. And then I found out these pillars was at the same school that was telling black people they can't go. They don't look like a pillar to me. They look like a pillar to them. Because I feel if you couldn't let somebody who got different color sin come in, why do I care about how many people you baptize? Oh, see? See, you just looking like this way. Oh, this. What about with abortion rights? Everyone on Twitter with abortion. But what about when abortion was illegal in this country? Where was church? I'm talking about Church of Christ, where I can Google in the United States and see, oh, look at these band of millions of Christians acting opposite of the rest of the United States. Where? Somebody Google search and find that. Where I can find an article about that. Why not? See, that's the problem I have, because people always arguing about political things. Put politics to the side. Cast your ballot and move on with your life. I want to talk about spiritual things where people can say, wow, people really living the Bible that way in modern times. And a group of million Christians could say, yes, we still living the Bible that way. So now is the time. People coming out more and more out saying, hey, I was sexually abused. I was sexually assaulted. Where is church? Because that happens in church. Oh, that happens in congregations. We need to address those things. We can't be like, oh, well, the way I was raised is women were just supposed to. Nobody care how you was raised, not in church. Well, who somebody care how somebody was raised in here when we talking about church thing? We talking about how Jesus is raising us. So some of us have to put down how our mom raised us. Sorry, but some of us do, because some of us was raised wrong. According to our Bible, we need to be more like Boaz, where we can see need and say, I'm going to address need first over my own desires. Need over desires. Oh, people can't do that, right? People is, I need to eat. What about somebody who don't have? Well, I don't know what to tell them. Let them beg for it or whatever. I need to eat. We have to get to the point where we can grow as Christians, but let's start establishing that in each local congregation so that the word can get out, where people will say, man, that church is very different. Those people living differently, not preaching differently, not teaching differently, living differently. Those people are living off of the foundation of love. I never seen people that way. I never seen group of people loving that way. That's what every local congregation to be known for. But why can't I find that in the masses? It's 1 million something plus Church of Christ members. 11,000 Church of Christ congregations. That's plenty. That's more congregations than McDonald's. The numbers are there. But what are we doing? Not living. People always telling me about teaching and preaching. It's living. Because if you live it, you don't got to teach and preach. Just your actions, you would convict. But we have to get to that point. But I'm telling you, as hard as it is to digest, it starts in the home. Those of you who are married and with kids, I charge you with that today. Go home and take a spiritual evaluation of your home, because your home is about to produce people into society and into congregations. What kind of home are you setting right now? You are the king and queen of your own home. You decide what kind of home are you setting. If you always focus on the wrong thing gonna come out your house. So when the wrong thing come out of the house, we should not be surprised. We should be like, what? Oh, I knew the wrong thing will come out the house. If I never train my dog to stop biting people, I shouldn't be shocked. Right? What would I say? I knew my dog was going to bite somebody. Why? Because I never taught it not to bite somebody. Why would it just all of a sudden stop biting people? Because what? That's how life works. But we have to take that what? Responsibility. Women do a much better job of that than men. This society of men, they don't take responsibility for nothing. That's why when Me Too movement come out, they couldn't even fathom that somebody was sexually assaulted on their job. Couldn't even remember a time, right? Don't they always say, well, I can't recall. No way that happened at our work. They couldn't even understand a slim possibility where that was true. See, that means they lost. They're not looking like a Boaz. Boaz would have been like, wait a minute, let's investigate this thing and see if this is right or not. This what I'm saying is we have to get there as churches and as families to impact our society. We have to do a better job as Christians as impacting our society, not just on Facebook, sitting up arguing with people all day, living different. Okay, next week, let's look at the second half of chapter 4 with the transaction that Boaz and Ruth are about to be married. And then as we go into the second half of chapter 4, we'll look at if they had children or not. Thanks for everyone's comments and our Bible readers. Let's have a quick word of prayer, and then we'll transition into worship service. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this beautiful and blessed day. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to petition up to the things that are in our hearts and our minds. At this time, we're focused on Bible study. We pray, dear God, that you give us the opportunity, the discernment, the knowledge, the wisdom to be able to be in this world, but not of this world. That we'll be able to live according to how Jesus lived and taught us to live, not according to our culture, our traditions, or how we were raised, but how you are molding and shaping us. We pray, dear Heavenly Fathers, that as mothers and fathers and as parents and as siblings and as brothers and sisters in every congregation, really in the brotherhood all over the world, that we'll have a mindset of doing those things which are pleasing to you and putting others above ourselves and living a life in love and service first and foremost. As we transition into our worship service, we pray that those traveling will have safe travels without the loss or harm of any. And we pray that we will position up to you a sweet smelling aroma to thy throne room in the form of worship and praise, in spirit and in truth. And in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right. Thank you again for all of our comment and all of our Bible readers.